Welcome, everybody. We're excited to be here for another episode of And Yet We Believe.
This is episode number 38. Thanks for everybody who is joining us on Instagram. And we have titled this episode, Avoiding Contention, Even When We Think We're Right. All right? Okay, and so this topic is fueled by some things that we've been seeing in social media, on Instagram, other places, where we find Latter-day Saints like ourselves who are a little more on the nuanced side, and they're out there doing the good work and trying to make space for people in the church.
Yeah.
And sometimes they run up against people who are a little different breed and are saying, hey, there's one way to live this, there's one way to be, and it can get a little bit contentious. Mm-hmm. And the tricky part is you have somebody that maybe you see as closed-minded that says, hey, there's only one way to do this, only one way to be a Latter-day Saint.
And maybe legitimately is closed-minded. It's not just that we see them that way.
Very well may be. Yeah. Very well may be. But the really tricky part is we see some of these more open-minded Latter-day Saints responding and saying, hey, no, we need to make space for everybody. But doing so using the same contention that the other person is. Using those same tactics, and it resorts to name calling and turns into this big thing, and you get all these things in the comments of people going back and forth, and it's not terribly Christ-like. It's not the way we want to go about it. And so even the people that are advocating for making space for others aren't making space for somebody else.
Yeah, so the tricky thing here is, like, you could, as a nuanced member,
sure,
you could see another member of the church that is closed-minded, that is saying you have to be one way or the highway sort of thing.
Yep.
You could see them as doing harm, creating harm, hurting people, and that's legitimate. That's real.
I agree.
The thing of it is like that thought process is a binary way of thinking. To be closed-minded, to see one way, black and white thinking, it's a binary. And so sometimes we have a tendency when we morph into a third stage person, like Brian McLaren says, it's concentric circles. So we build on what we knew before.
So we keep our stage one pieces, we keep our stage two pieces.
And we just continue to grow. And we have a tendency, and I say we because I do this a lot. I am not free from this calling out. But we take that binary and flip it so that now we're the good one and they're the bad one, and we have to call them out for the harm that they are causing. And that is that is valid. It is valid to call out harm when you are being hurt.
But what you're talking about is just going right back into black and white thinking.
Yes.
There's still good guys and bad guys. It's the same thing as when we were in stage one.
Right. And the problem is the tactics that we use to call out the behavior of a stage one person or a conservative thinker or whatever, however we want to call it, to use those tactics to put them down, to belittle, to dehumanize, those are negative conversation tactics. It does not help conversation go on. Now, let's be very, very clear from the get-go. This is a separate conversation from when people are sexually abused or when physical harm is happening. And we're not trying to say that physical harm is more important than mental harm, or, we're not going to level those things, rank those things. When there is physical harm, get out of it. No one is saying stay and be in it and just deal with it and be kind and be loving. We are not saying that.
Right.
Please do not read into anything we say tonight trying to say that we are advocating for people to stay in harm. That is not what we're doing. We are talking primarily about our social interactions on social media.
Right.
Our interactions with other human beings on social media. So let's just be really clear about that.
Very, very clear about that. And I think it comes back to two things, which is, one, nobody's opinion ever got changed by arguing in the comments on the internet.
Right.
And two, we don't make it better by being contentious and argumentative. If there was any hope of having a proper conversation in the comments on YouTube or Instagram or wherever we are, if there was any hope of it, we throw it all away when we resort to that kind of name calling and other contentious tactics in the conversation.
Yeah. So I think there's some interesting definitions we should go over really quickly. The difference between contention and conflict, I think that is important. And then I also want to bring in contempt, because I think that a lot of our contentious, what we would call contentious interactions online, I think it actually has a root or a lot of foundation in contempt. So let's talk about those three things. What do you think about contention and conflict? Let's start there.
Yeah, this is a model that some people really like. I get confused. I get the words flip-flopped sometimes, and that makes it a little bit less effective as a model.
Yeah.
Contention is the bad one here. And conflict, I would just say disagreement.
Yeah, conflict is healthy. It's differences, disagreement.
Right, differences of opinion. And I've heard it described that conflict or disagreement is task-oriented. It's about ideas. It's about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And you can have a difference of ideas with somebody, and you can talk about that. Well, I think this. Okay, well, I think this. Great. Whatever. Contention is the one that's people-oriented, where now you're saying, you're an idiot, you're wrong, this is about you, this is no longer about a sharing of ideas.
Right.
And that's I think what Jesus was talking about when he talked about contention. And that word shows up a bunch of times in the scriptures as this bad thing. So I think those definitions align. I think the Sermon on the Mount is, you could say that the main thrust to me of the Sermon on the Mount is stepping away from contention.
Yeah.
And this is where he's saying, well, blessed are the peacemakers, for one. He's saying, thou shalt not, it used to be said, thou shalt not kill. Now I'm telling you, don't be angry. And he's saying, it used to be said, an eye for an eye. I'm telling you to turn the other cheek. He comes back again and again and again to this idea of stepping away from contention. So that's the difference to me of contention is the bad one. That's the name calling. That's the fighting. Conflict is disagreement, a difference of ideas. That's okay. We can work with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, as you were kind of going through the Sermon on the Mount examples, the thing that popped into my head was what Jesus teaches is really a maturity of emotion. It's a mature way to handle things. It's not vindictive. It's not vengeful. It's not like trying to get retribution for things that have happened to you.
Right.
And I think that when we are arguing online, it does turn into that. Like, oh, you said a mean thing about me. Well, I'm going to say a mean thing about you. You belittled me. I'm going to belittle you.
Right.
That it's very easy to do that. And I think that that's where it kind of goes into contempt.
Okay. Tell us about that.
So this is from Brene Brown's book, Atlas of the Heart. And she's actually quoting the Gottmans. John and Julie Gottman? I might have that somewhere in here. But anyway, they say simply, contempt is I'm better than you and you are lesser than me. So that's a pretty good definition. Brene says contempt results in distancing, ignoring, or excluding the contemptible person. They are not considered worthy of one's time or energy. This attitude is partially attributable to the key distinguishing feature between contempt and anger, namely that contempt results when there is the perception that the contemptible person is incapable of change.
Ooh, okay.
So I think that's really interesting. And that drives a lot of anger and frustration with people online. And I think it easily leads to dehumanization as well. And I have a little more to say about that from Arthur Brooks, but maybe we'll move on for now and see if it circles back around to that.
Okay. Okay. So I wanted to bring into this a model from a favorite of ours, Richard Rohr. And he talks about this. He calls this the path of the prophet. And here he's talking about a lowercase p prophet, which can be anybody. Yep. It's not talking about the president of the church. This is something that can apply to any of us. And he talks about this process, this path of going from anger to sadness to love.
Yeah.
And he calls it righteous anger to deep sadness and grief to universal love and compassion. And I like this because it honors wherever somebody is at. But it does present this as a progression that starts with anger. And I think we see this a lot with people whose relationship with the church has started to get complicated.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of anger, and it's a difficult time. And I see this in the comment threads on Instagram.
Yeah.
You know, and this is something that I feel myself. You know, and I look at comments that people made, and I go, "You're a stage 1 person, and I used to be there too. And I'm so glad I'm not, you know, a dork like you who's still in stage 1." That's as strong language as I use. But Richard Rohr talks about this as indignation against oppression and injustice, primarily. But here's what I like the most: he calls it an awakening. And I think a lot of people will relate to that in terms of their relationship to the church. Okay, I was this kind of member for my entire life, and then something changed. A switch flipped.
Right.
Something ended up different. And so I related to Richard Rohr calling this an awakening. And it starts with anger, and hopefully righteous anger, hopefully not something that just kind of wallows.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm going to pull from our other favorite author, Valerie Kaur.
Let's hear it.
And I have a lot from Valerie Kaur today. So she, kind of along these same lines, she says, "My rage showed me that I was worth protecting." And nice. I think that that's really an interesting way to look at it. That we, and I see that with people that are, you know, altering their faith a little bit, changing how they approach church, that they finally realize that they are worth protecting and speaking up for, advocating for. I have felt that. I've definitely felt that. She says, Valerie continues, "Rage is a healthy, normal, and necessary response to trauma. It's a rightful response to the social traumas of patriarchy, white supremacy, misogyny, homophobia, transphobia, and poverty. But we live in a culture that punishes us when we show our teeth." And then she talks about how we can't suppress it, though, because when we suppress our anger or our rage, often it can be explosive. In men, that often shows up as violence.
Sure.
In women, it shows up as self-loathing, stress, and illness. All of those can be symptoms of suppressing your emotion. And so she says something really interesting. She says, "The solution is not suppress our rage or let it explode, but to find safe containers, emotional spaces safe enough to express our body's impulses without shame and without harming ourselves or others. Only when we give rage an external expression outside our bodies can we be in relationship with it. We can then ask, what information does my rage carry? What is it telling me? Divine rage is fierce, disciplined, and visionary. The aim of divine rage is not vengeance, but to reorder the world. It is precise and purposeful. Perhaps our task as human beings is to find safe containers for our raw reactionary rage and then choose to harness that energy in a way that creates a new world for all of us."
Boy,
so
good.
I think that's a lot of the problem that I'm seeing is maybe people don't have safe containers for their reactionary rage.
When it comes to the church specifically, sometimes this is something that somebody's carrying alone.
Right.
And, you know, maybe they haven't even told their spouse or their family or their friends or whatever because they are afraid of what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And so that actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. But I really like what she's saying is once we find that safe container and can kind of process stuff, then we can ask ourselves, well, what is this telling me? What do I need to do? Where do I go from here? What do I need to do with all of this energy that I have? And then you can start to reimagine the world. She talked about it kind of as a dance, that there's this rhythm where we feel the rage and we step away to feel the rage. We come back and listen to it and try and learn from it. And then we move forward trying to reimagine, find solutions as we go forward.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I like that a lot. So this is us honoring the people in the comment section who are angry. it makes sense and we understand.
It's so valid.
It really, really is.
Yeah.
The second stage that Richard Rohr talks about, so again, on this path of the prophet, it goes from righteous anger to what he calls deep sadness and grief. And this is maybe the most fascinating stage of this for me. And I actually want to read a sort of lengthy quote. I'll read a lengthy quote this time from Richard Rohr. But the whole point of going from anger to sadness is solidarity. And it's solidarity with the other, which is very scary. But let me just read what he says, because he's going to describe it way better than I can. He says, try to recognize that hidden inside of your anger is always a judgment that she, he, they did this wrong, and I am enlightened enough to see it as wrong and name it. So there's kind of there's a judgment piece in that anger. Now that's the construct that falls apart by grace when you recognize I have benefited from the sin of the world. I am benefiting right now. I'm benefiting by being able to think of you as inferior to me. Because you're gay, because you're black, because you, and I'm going to expound on this, because you disagree with how to live the gospel or this or that.
You're orthodox.
Whatever it is that you're talking about.
Or you're orthodox or you're nuanced. Like this goes both ways.
Either way, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, and he continues. But when you're willing to carry the burden of the other, that she, he, they are as fooled as I am, and I have compassion for that, instead of hating it, separating it, judging it, once you see this, you can't stop seeing it. Again, the widening circles, marginalized groups, the poor. And I'll stray from the quote here, but once you see that we're both in it together, and I like how he says we're both fooled. You know, and I'm this concept of benefiting from the sin is kind of wild to me. I'm benefiting because my ego is being stroked, because I'm thinking I'm better than you because of our difference, whatever it may be. And this is how we get to this deep sadness and grief. This is about a shared human condition.
Yeah.
This is about all being in it together and realizing that we are imperfect children of heavenly parents, and that's something that we can sit in together.
Yeah. This sadness, I think, is really interesting, and I definitely see that online as well. I hear a lot of people saying, I'm just so tired.
Yes.
I'm so tired of having to stand up for myself, or having to try and beg for people to let me be here as I want to authentically show up.
Yep.
And that is so valid too. It is so hard to consistently have to fight against people that want to push you out, whether they are intentionally trying to push you out or not. It's exhausting. And sometimes that's when communities like this that we are building and that we have together online, that's when those communities are so important, because we can step in, we can help other people when we're struggling. One of the things that Valerie talks about is, she says, just as we need accomplices to hold protected spaces where the most traumatized among us tend to our grief, so too do we need accomplices to stand by us when we express our rage and help others to understand it. I think that that's a really interesting part. I have a friend in my ward that she has had some interactions with our bishop that have been hard, and he was trying to talk with her, and he said, you know, I'd love to sit down and talk with you and go over this stuff. And she said, she's like, I'm sorry, that's not going to work for me, but if you want to talk to somebody, you can go talk to Anne. And then she came running over to me and was like, I just threw you under the bus. I'm so sorry. and actually, as you know, as much as that was like, I don't want to do that. At the same time, I am in a better place than she was at that moment. I was in a better place to be able to interact in a way to help explain our shared grief that we feel. And she was not in a place to do that calmly or whatever. She was recognizing that she needed a safe space. She needed to have an accomplice with her that could stand in for her. And there's just kind of this, like, when some of us are pushing hard, others are taking a breath, and then we can switch places. And I can finally rest and somebody else can step in and push, you know?
Yeah.
We don't need to do it all the time, and we need to allow ourselves time to actually grieve the loss that we're going through, a loss of community, a loss of like normal church culture, whatever it is that we feel we have lost, whether that's connection with God or, you know, whatever it is, we need to take the time to actually grieve what's going on.
Yeah, I love that so much. And some of that's having solidarity with even like-minded people. You know, Richard Rohr is talking about this is about us all being in it together. I love this idea of having accomplices in that. So, okay, if we finish out our sequence here, the path goes from righteous anger to deep sadness and grief. And that grief and that lamentation and that suffering goes into the last stage, which is universal love and compassion. And I feel like that's a pretty straight line from grief into love and compassion. He uses the word alchemized, that your grief gets alchemized into love, which, you know, alchemy was about turning worthless materials into gold, into something valuable. So he's talking about turning your grief into something very valuable. And he says that grief helps us to become more patient like God, more forgiving like God, more loving like God.
Yeah. One of my favorite people online to follow is Sharon McMahon, America's government teacher. If you don't know who she is, look her up. But she says, the older I get, the more convinced I am that righteousness has very little to do with winning arguments and everything to do with how we treat people. So that's the love part of it, that, you know, we have to ask ourselves, is it worth fighting with this person on the internet right now? And if it is worth engaging, the most important thing is not winning the argument, but it is treating that person with respect.
Because we can take winning the argument off the table.
Yeah.
Nobody wins an argument on the internet.
Right. And we have to remember the person on the other side of the screen is a person.
Right.
That is another human being. And that's a lot of the problem with social media commenting and the fights that people get into, that we all get into online, is that it's anonymous. Essentially, it's anonymous. We don't know these people. We don't know their backgrounds. We don't know where they live. We don't know how they show up at church. But we assume a whole lot of things about them.
Oh, yeah.
And we have this anonymity, even though our name is attached to it and you can try and figure out where they're from or what they stand for or whatever, we're making a lot of assumptions, and then we don't ever have to face them again. If these conversations happen in person, guaranteed they would be so different.
Yeah.
Because there's social or like physical cues,
and social norms.
So yeah, there's other things that stop us from interacting with people in person the way that we do online.
Yeah. Now, online, you have that opportunity most of the time to just keep scrolling, right? And, you know, you get caught up in a back and forth, you know, arguing with somebody in the comments on a post on Instagram or wherever it is. Or if you had just let that go, then like 3 posts later, would you have forgotten about it?
Yeah.
You know, and I'm talking about pretty low stakes stuff. I'm talking about stuff on the internet, but just scrolling, just keeping on scrolling is a pretty valid approach here.
Yeah, so I have a really embarrassing example of this that you were a part of because I called you when I was struggling.
Okay.
So I did a post a couple of weeks ago, and somebody mentioned or sent me a message and was like, nope, you're doing it wrong. You know, just kind of wanted to shut down my experience, my lived experience, and how I was feeling about something that had happened. And I responded, and I was like, I was really trying to be so kind and calm. And I was like, you know, here's how I see it. And I'm sorry, but this is my truth. Like, you can't tell me to think something different because you don't know who I am. And he responded with a nasty, mean thing. And so I called Roger, and I was not saying kind words. I was like, I'm going to respond, and I'm going to say this and this and this, and I can't let this go. And, you know, he just caught me on a bad day, and I'm going to fight today. I was choosing violence. It was not okay. And luckily, I was at the dentist with my son, and I had stepped out to have this phone conversation. And I went back in like, okay, I'm going to sit down and type out this message to this man and put him in his place. because I'm right, you're wrong, that whole thing. I was feeling it hardcore.
Yep.
And then I was like, okay, well, I'm at the dentist. My son's almost done. I'll just wait till I get home or whatever. And 30-40 minutes went by and I didn't even think about him anymore. The whole rage had left my body. He was my safe container. I processed what I was feeling, and I realized that I wouldn't win that. Not that I wouldn't win the conversation, but I didn't care about winning. I didn't care what this person thought. And again, we are not saying don't engage with people.
Right.
We are saying be careful how you engage with people. Be aware of how you're engaging with people.
Yeah, so Richard Rohr says that this isn't about passive acceptance,
Right.
and again, let's be trauma informed here.
Yes.
There are higher stakes scenarios than what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But Richard calls it sacred criticism, is his phrase.
Interesting.
The point being confronting a bad situation while acknowledging that we're all connected. And
seeing the humanity.
That's it exactly.
Yeah.
So that solidarity again, to be picturing the person on the other side of that screen, and putting a little bit of context around that instead of just, hey, somebody's wrong on the internet and I'm gonna go set them straight, but acknowledging it in that broader context.
Yeah. Yeah, we're so divided, and I often ask myself, why do we feel like we have to set people straight? Why do we have
Right?
such a desire to set someone straight and make sure their beliefs change? Or, why are we taking on that responsibility for other people? We can't force them to change.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
I wonder if I think it's a human thing.
Definitely.
Do you think it's more exaggerated in the church?
No.
Okay.
I honestly don't. I think this is a human, maybe in America, but not, I don't think this is a church thing versus US. I think it's across the board. Everybody's nasty with each other right now.
I do have a scripture that is almost funny in this context.
Okay.
And this is Jesus talking in 3 Nephi chapter 11. And he says, and there shall be no disputations among you, as there have hitherto been. Great. Mm-hmm. And then he specifies and says, neither shall there be disputations among you concerning the points of my doctrine, as there have hitherto been. So he's like,
oh dear.
Stop.
Don't fight over doctrine.
Stop arguing over doctrine. And it's like, oh, all right. Yeah, that's like a Lord is it I situation, right? Like, oh, that was maybe for me.
Wow. Yeah, I've never pulled that part of the scripture out. Whoo, feeling a little called out.
Right.
So maybe I can pull in this stuff from Arthur Brooks again that I had kind of talked about earlier.
Yeah.
So he talks about, let me see, a 2014 article in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on motive attribution asymmetry. Says the assumption of your ideology is based in love while your opponent's is based in hate suggests an answer. The researchers found that the average Republican and the average Democrat today suffer from a level of motive attribution asymmetry that is comparable with that of Palestinians and Israelis. Each side thinks it is driven by benevolence, while the other is evil and motivated by hatred, and is therefore an enemy with whom one cannot negotiate or compromise. Let's take that into the church then. Okay. This was talking about politics and world things, but let's bring that into the church where, we as nuanced believers think we have, this broader vision of God and we have more understanding of love of Jesus.
So we think we're right.
We think we're right, and we think that the other person who is closed-minded and who doesn't want to make space for us is evil.
Yes.
We go straight to evil and full of hate. And, we put all of these labels onto people. And yes, some of that may be true. Like, we're not going to sugarcoat that. Some people might be, and we might be full of hate. We might, we might have just as much hate in our hearts for the people that seem to be hurting us.
Right.
As we assume that they have about us.
But then when we flip it and we think about their motives,
right,
that's where it changes, right?
Yeah.
So that's we have to assume that this person thinks the same thing. That's what the motive attribution asymmetry was all about. Was they may think they're approaching this with love.
Yeah.
And there are definitely Latter-day Saints, I think I probably was one for a long time, who felt that like it felt like it was my job to wield the sword of truth, right? And to get out there and to correct error and these sorts of things. And I probably thought that I was doing that in a loving way. Yeah,
doing God's work.
Right.
Standing up for truth and righteousness and
all of that. And so if like a neutral third party was to go then look at the comments going back and forth between these two faithful Latter-day Saints who both feel like they're doing the right thing, this neutral observer might go, you guys are nuts.
Yeah, you're eating the same side of the apple, it's eating the same apple from different sides.
Yeah. And going, why are you calling each other names? And why are you being so horrible to each other?
Yeah.
You have the same end in mind. You have the same goals in mind, for the most part. But we always assume that whoever's on the other side of the screen is nowhere near as noble as we are. And that's what Richard Rohr talked about this imbalance where we're looking at somebody and saying, I feel really good right now because I feel like I'm better than you. And that's fueling the conversation. Not a great place to be.
And it takes a lot of humility to just say, you know what, I'm going to walk away from this.
Yeah.
And I have been there. 2020 Ann was not a friendly person on social media. I had a lot of opinions and I was right about a lot of things. I am a different human now. But it really bugged me to think that there were people out there thinking these harmful things about people. And I had to stop it. I knew what was better and I needed to stop it. And gosh, did I suffer that year. It was a hard year and it was an emotional weight that I carried that I didn't need to be carrying. What somebody else believes is not going to do the damage to me or even to society that I think it will.
No, that's
I think we kind of turn everything into a hyperbole where we want to just make it bigger than what it actually is.
Yeah.
So really quick as we're wrapping up, I am a conversation host through MWEG for Living Room Conversations. Switch that. Through Living Room Conversations for MWEG.
Great. Either way,
I've been trained to be a conversation host. And every conversation that we have, the point of these conversations is to bring people together from differing backgrounds, different beliefs, and to learn how to learn and practice having a good conversation where we don't go in trying to convince people. We're just going in to listen and to learn about others. And every conversation that we have, we read these 6 conversation agreements. And I've kind of condensed them a little bit for the sake of time. But I just want to go over those really fast because I want to encourage us to think about these things as we see comments that we don't agree with, as we interact with people that are different than us. Let's have these things going through our minds to have better conversations. Because this is a skill that we have to develop. This is not something that comes naturally to humans.
Okay, all right, let's hear them.
So be curious and listen to understand. And remember, Valerie Kaur says, listening to understand means that we might be changed by what we hear. And we have to be open to that.
Yes.
Show respect and suspend judgment. Know any common ground as well as any differences. Be authentic and welcome that from others. Be purposeful and to the point, and then own the conversation. Take responsibility for the quality of your participation. I think that those are really important things they're practical things that we can practice as we have conversations online with people. Yeah. The goal is to not make the other person feel dumb or to feel like they are an idiot for thinking what they think.
Right.
The goal is to share God's love. Right? Everything we do needs to be motivated by love. And the goal, if we want to talk with these people, with anyone on the internet that we see as other or different from us,
right?
I think that we have to just remember the humanity. We can share our opinion and leave it there. We don't need to call names. We don't need to, point out their fallacies or whatever. As Michelle Obama says, when they go low, we go high.
Right.
And we have to take that high road, and it is the hardest thing that we can possibly do, but it is so important.
It really is, and I'll share a quick experience as my kind of parting thought here. But we mentioned this kind of Lord is it I thing, and it's so easy to take a conversation like this and be like, oh, I hope all these other people are hearing this and paying attention so that they will change. We all have to take this. Because this is all of us. And we may be in the anger stage or the sadness stage or, you know, or ideally in the love stage. I don't know that I'm there yet, you know, or at least all the time. But I had this experience where somebody was kind of following me around the internet and commenting, I thought, pretty negative things on a lot of stuff that I was posting and writing. And I kind of had to deal with it because it was somebody that I had a personal relationship with. So it wasn't just somebody that I could dismiss in that way. And I hated that I had to be the bigger person, you know? And I love talking about, hey, we should all love each other. And hey, you know, we're all children of God and we should all treat each other that way. Yeah. And then when it came down to it, I was like, nah, I want to be nasty, you know? And it was taxing. It was difficult to go, nope. I'm going to slow this down. And like, I wrote a response and I sent it to Anne and she read it and gave me feedback and I rewrote it. And like, it was really, really challenging to put into practice these things that are so easy to talk about. Yeah. So that's the homework, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I want to reiterate, you know, we are not saying don't speak up, just be a doormat. Right. We're not telling people, we're not trying to tone police even, but we're just asking you to take a beat. We all need to take a beat, take a pause, and think about what we're doing and what our purpose is, what our motivation is, why we are doing what we're doing. And maybe we can just close with a quick quote from President Nelson.
Great.
He said, "My dear brothers and sisters, how we treat each other really matters. How we speak to and about others at home, at church, at work, and online really matters. Today, I'm asking us to interact with others in a higher and holier way."
There it is.
There it is. It's hard.
It really is.
And we are with you. If you want us to be your safe containers, please reach out. We literally would love to be a safe container for people's rage and sadness. And
people do reach out. We get these messages and we are happy to receive them and we'll be there for you as much as we can be.
Yeah, but let's really try to think about how we are interacting with people. Our words matter, and we have to do better if we want any sort of calmness and kindness in the church. And I am not saying calmness as a like passive.
Right.
There's none of that. I am a number one advocate and activist in my life. Like I will stand up when something needs to be said. Yes. But the way we do it matters.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right.
That's it.
It's a good conversation.
Thanks for coming tonight.
We'll see y'all next time.